The bar gets set pretty high sometimes. I'm delighted to be with you this evening. I imagine from looking at you that everyone in this room has probably had something happen in your life which was so emotionally charged, had so much impact on you, was so huge in your experience, that if I ask you to think about it, it'd be like it happened this morning. I mean, on rare occasions, something will happen in our lives that is so emotionally charged, has so much impact on us, that we sort of carry it around forever. It's indelibly imprinted in our brain somewhere. For me, one of those things happened on the 31st of August, 1967. I don't want to know how old I don't want to know if you are not. I know that this is like ancient history for some of you. For others of you, I can see that it's old hat. But I'll tell you what, the 31st of August, 1967 stands out in my mind as though it were etched in crystal. I can look at every detail of it. I can run it forward, backward, fast action, stop action. The 31st of August, 1967, I was a somewhat younger naval aviator. I was flying an A-4 aircraft off the aircraft carrier Oriskany. We were in the Gulf of Tonkin, about 60 miles from the coast of North Vietnam. The 31st of August, 1967, in the Gulf of Tonkin was one of those gray, hazy days at sea. It was the kind of day where you stand up on the flight deck and look out. There's no horizon out there. Everything's the same color. Kind of goes from over your head to under your feet. We manned airplanes about 7 o'clock in the morning, launched 18 of them from the ship, rendezvoused overhead, got ourselves organized, pointed the noses toward the coast of North Vietnam. The target that day was a small railroad bridge just inland from the port city of Haiphong. We crossed the beach, they started shooting. They always started shooting. That day, among all the other stuff, I remember very clearly, they fired in succession from way, way out in front of us 2 surface-to-air missiles. Now, back in the day, a surface-to-air missile was about the size of a small telephone pole. And when they'd launch them, there'd be so much dust and flame kicked up from just getting them off the launch rails that from altitude, we could see them launch them from miles away. And once they had them in the sky, the plume of flame on the booster rocket was so big and so bright, you just tracked them as they went through the sky. So I sat in my cockpit that day, and I watched the first missile. It's a little bitty point of light sitting on my windshield. And it just sat there. And it got bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter and bigger, till finally it started to move on my windshield. And I knew as soon as it started to move on my windshield that it would or would not hit me. What do you think? Would? Would not? This is a very important question we're dealing with here. Well, it's not going to hit me. You guessed would, but that was wrong. It's not going to hit. It's a relative motion kind of problem. It's like when you try to get on a freeway. As long as the cars move relative to each other, there's no problems. When there's no relative movement, we have problems. So the first missile started to move. I knew it wouldn't hit me. I turned my attention to the second missile. It just sat there. It's just a little point of light. And it's getting bigger and brighter and bigger and brighter. Till finally I decided if it wouldn't move, I would. And that day, I had a brilliant idea. You've probably had ideas like this. They sort of come to us in a flash. All of a sudden, we know. What I decided to do, rather than go to my left and have to dodge through 16 airplanes that were out here somewhere beside me, I decided to just roll my airplane up on its back, go across the top of the only airplane on the right, come down on the outside, press onto the target. And it was a good idea until I was upside down over this airplane beside me. The missile went right between us. There was a huge explosion. Fireball blew the tail section off my airplane. The airplane just stayed on its back, started spinning and tumbling and gyrating and falling through the sky. It was shaking so bad that nothing would focus. When I took the instrument panel, it was just a blur in the cockpit. The stick was real loose. It was like not connected to anything anymore. Both rudder pedals were up against the firewall. This thing was wallowing and tumbling and falling. I had all the flying characteristics of a brick. I mean, this thing is coming through the sky like a ton of lead. And I'll tell you this, every time the nose of that airplane go by the water, and for me, that water meant safety. it seemed like it would hesitate. And I'd think to myself, this thing's going to fly. And I'd start stirring on that stick and kicking the pedals, the nose would whip off. Going through 4,000 feet, I got a glimpse of my altimeter, ejected from the airplane, had a parachute, landed in the middle of a small North Vietnamese village. Now, when I landed, there was nobody around. I don't know where they were. They went away wherever they went for air raids. So I get rid of my helmet and my parachute. I ducked out between the hooches, and I started running out across the rice paddy. And as I'm running out across the rice paddy, I can look up and I can watch those airplanes flying away. So I'm kind of, and running's probably not a good word for what happens in a rice paddy. You know, the mud's about this deep out there, and I'm slugging my way through it as best I can, and I'm watching those airplanes. I get to about the middle of the rice paddy, and I can see that one of those airplanes is turning around, and he was coming back. So I stopped right there. I started digging around in my gear, and I dug out a little radio that we carried. Now, I had had this radio in my hands a lot of times. The Navy used to make us get them out every couple of weeks and check the batteries. We used to play with them on the ship. The point is, I've had this radio in my hands a lot. But now I'm standing out in the middle of a rice paddy. I got mud up to the middle of my calves. I'm watching that airplane. He's coming right straight at me. I've got this little radio. For the life of me, I couldn't get the radio turned on. It was like I had all thumbs on both my hands. I'm watching him, and he's getting closer, and I'm trying to get the doggone, and it's not a complicated machine. It only has maybe 2 or 3 little switches on it, but I can't get the switches in the right sequence, and he's getting closer and closer until finally, about the time he boomed across the top, I managed to mash down on the right combination of buttons on that radio, and it sparked to life, which allowed me to say, in my very finest airline pilot drawl, it's me down here. Somebody's got to come get me. I need somebody to get me out of here. I need somebody. And I started babbling in this radio. And my voice was up about 3 octaves. And it's just all gushing out of me. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, this does not sound good. But there was nothing I could do about it. The best thing that happened was I ran myself out of breath. And when I ran out of breath, I had to pause the inhale. And when I paused the inhale, I let off one of those buttons on that radio, which allowed Dean then to get a word in edgewise. And Dean said, you know we cannot come and get you. At which point, I couldn't think of anything clever to say anymore. And Dean said, I'll see you when this is over. And he flew away.